Well, the president says the L word and the media melts down. The GOP storms the Adam Schiff secret impeachment inquisition. The media melts down. Yeah, it's been a good week. The president referred to the Russian collusion narrative and the entire Mueller investigation as a witch hunt. Well, this past week he changed up his adjectives a little bit in reference to this so-called impeachment inquiry, which isn't really an impeachment inquiry because the House has not voted on it. It's just this never-ending illusion of an impeachment so that Nancy Botox Pelosi can hold off the squad, hold off the more rabid members of her congressional caucus, and keep the really ultra-lib loons at bay within her party. She knows the president hasn't done anything that is impeachable, but she also likes this narrative drumbeat every day in the news cycle because she believes this is her strategy for defeating Donald Trump going into the 2020 election cycle, because as we look at this cast of clowns that they are running for the nomination of their party to challenge Donald Trump, when it comes right down to actual ideas and policies that will work, they are failing, they have failed, they have no one that excites or energizes the country and will rally people to come out and vote, especially against a president who's got a rock and rollin' economy like this one. He's bringing the troops back from the Middle East. Times are good. And so they have to destroy this president with never-ending inquisition and talk of impeachment. And so the president, he has just simply had enough. And he dared use the L word. He said he's being lynched.
All Republicans must remember what they are witnessing here, a lynching. Many quickly condemned the president's remarks. Some Democratic lawmakers pointed out the president is trying to distract the country.
To compare the constitutional process to something like lynching is far beneath the office of the President of the United States.
Well, first, Brian, the reason that this can happen so glibly on the part of this president is the lack of history that most Americans understand. Lynching is still seen as this terrible thing that occasionally the Klan did.
Now, he went on to say that a case study proves that lynching was also done not just by the KKK, but it was also done against white people who stood up for black citizens, especially white Democrats. What? Where'd that little piece of revisionist history come from? The KKK was created by the Democratic Party. That's right, 1865, the Grand Knights of the Ku Klux Klan was a Democratic creation to keep black people in line so that they know their place, so that they don't try to aspire to equal rights or equal anything. And this was a culmination of ideology of the Dixiecrats, the Southern Democrats. The truth is, the Civil Rights Act of the 1960s would never have been passed. Lyndon Baines Johnson would have never been able to sign it into law if he hadn't been able to get the Republicans in Congress to vote for it because his own party wouldn't. Hate to cloud the issue there with facts, but that's the truth. That said, the word lynch has been used for years to talk about a mob mentality where people take the rule of law into their own hands. And despite what the representative from South Carolina had to say, no, this has not been a constitutional proceeding. It has been done in the cover of darkness. And so now this idea that Adam Schiff holds all this power. Only he knows who the whistleblower is. Only he knows who the whistleblower's contacts are. The 400 plus members of Congress don't know. The 300 million citizens of the United States don't know. And to keep saying that this is being done constitutionally. No, it's not. When Nixon was impeached, when Bill Clinton was impeached, it was done out in the open. It was on television. It was a 24-hour news cycle. And both Nixon and Clinton's attorneys were present. They could question witnesses. They were allowed to call witnesses. They were allowed to call rebuttal witnesses. No such anything along those lines has been afforded to President Donald J. Trump. It's been done in a lynch mob mentality. And before you start screaming, you can't say that, you're white, a whole lot of white people were saying it when it was Bill Clinton. Oh, and by the way, those white people, they were Democrats.
How dare the president compare lynching to impeachment?
My votes are a protest against an unfair process. The inequities in the impeachment process have been glaring. What we are doing here is not a prosecution, it's a persecution. And indeed, it is a political lynching.
So I will not vote for this nightmare before Christmas. I will not vote for this lynching in the people's house. I will vote against these resolutions.
Even if the president should be impeached, history is going to question whether or not this was just a partisan lynching.
This day feels to me like we're taking a step down the road to becoming a political lynch mob.
And for those of you who say that this isn't about sex, I agree with you. This is about getting rid of the President of the United States. The whole idea is a lynch mob mentality.
Chris, don't call me Fredo Cuomo, had on Ohio representative to talk about the GOP storming the gates. And let me pause right here. It's about stinking time. It's about time that the Republicans finally showed some backbone. I am sick and tired of the Mitt Romneys and these rhinos, these Democrats dressed in Republican drag, these trans politicos who claim to be conservative, but in reality they're liberal, or I'm transitioning. I don't know what I am. I've had it. And why hasn't the Republicans stood up to defend a president who they've tried to take out with a coup? Now they're dreaming up a fraudulent impeachment that has not been put before the House for a vote. So this whole canard, this illusion of impeachment, because at the end of the day, Nancy Botox Pelosi knows she hasn't got the votes for this. She just doesn't. And she keeps talking about impeachment, but hasn't put it to a vote. And the reason she hasn't put it to a vote, bottom line, there are members of Congress running for re-election in Trump districts. They will not get re-elected if they vote for impeachment. She knows that. They know that. The American people knows that. The mainstream lying, legacy, corporate, corrupt mainstream media knows that. Isn't that right, Chuck effing Todd and Joe Mr. Magoo Scarborough? So she's not going to put this to a vote, but what she does like is this steady drumbeat in the news cycle every day. Impeach, impeach, impeach. And she is hoping that just slightly more than half the people in this country who don't really pay a lot of attention to the news, they just get it in sound bites. Well, I guess the president really did do something. They keep saying it every time I turn on the TV. And she is hoping to take that into the 2020 election cycle, because even she knows that this cast of clowns, socialists, libloons, and libtards that they are running are a train wreck, a disaster. President Trump has a great economy. He's bringing the troops back from the Middle East. Things are going in the right direction. Record unemployment. There is good stuff happening all around, but you wouldn't know it to hear the mainstream narrative. And so the only thing that Nancy Pelosi can do to help her party get that White House back, she hopes, She has to destroy the current occupant. She has to lie. She has to violate 9 different ways to Sunday, the Constitution, and she has to absolutely now turn this almost. This is like the Gestapo. I mean, really, this is like in Russia when the secret police shows up in the middle of the night and hauls people away, and you may never see them again. All these secret meetings done under the cover of darkness, and yet liberals are the ones that are always talking about, we have to have transparency. We have to have transparency. Well, Chris Fredo Cuomo, again, having a Ohio representative on, said, what do you people mean storming the sacred halls of this private, secret inquisition against the president? Don't you know you're not allowed to do that?
24 House Republicans storming the secure room where Pentagon official Laura Cooper was set to give a deposition, to testify. The GOP lawmakers went through 3 different doors carrying electronics. Why do I say it that way? You're not supposed to carry electronics into a SCIF, a secure room. They were shouting. They demanded to watch the classified deposition because they were being locked out. Oh, wait, no, they weren't. There was a handful of their Republican colleagues already inside, free to ask their own questions. So what was the move? What made this okay? Ohio Representative Bill Johnson is one of those Republicans who raided the SCIF. Congressman, welcome to Primetime.
Good to be with you, Chris. Thanks.
Sir, did you bring a phone in there?
Chris, let me make something very, very clear. You know, the Washington Post and I don't agree on very often, but I like their mast. On their mast, it says, democracy dies in darkness.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we headed down that hallway to demand to be able to do our job. That's what we were there for. There is no classified information being discussed in that room. It is a classified facility if classified information is being discussed, but there was no classified information being discussed there.
How do you know? That's an assistant secretary to the Defense Department talking about how aid gets brought and effectuated.
That person was not in the room at the time.
Look at that look on Chris Cuomo's face. It's like, huh? Really? She wasn't even there? Huh? You mean the room is not a top secret room? If nothing top secret's going on in there? Huh? Really?
I can handle things. I'm smart. Not like everybody says. Like dumb, I'm smart and I want respect.
Chris, don't call me Fredo Cuomo. Unbelievable. Now, as we move forward on this process, I would really like to see mass amounts of conservatives in this country take to the streets and demand that this so-called impeachment inquiry be done out in the light of day, out in the public, where we can all see what's going on. Now, that's not going to happen because conservatives, Republicans, we're patriotic, we're law-abiding, we pay our taxes, and we go to work every day. So there won't be a storming of the gates, but it's good to see Republicans finally standing up and storming the gates. But isn't it amazing how different the media coverage is? Why, just a few years ago, when the Democrats staged a sit-in in Congress because they weren't getting their own way and they demanded their way, why the media was like, this is amazing. This is democracy in action. We've never seen anything like this before.
An extraordinary sit-in on the House floor stretches into the early morning hours.
Make no mistake, this was dramatic, like nothing we have ever seen before. Truly one of the most dramatic demonstrations on the House floor in modern American history.
A protest like we've never seen before, but Democrats refused to back down, singing and waving signs.
Paul Ryan said that it was nothing but a publicity stunt. If that's the case, it's a damn good publicity stunt.
An historic sit-in showdown, stopping Congress in its tracks.
It's a win for now. This is such an extraordinary moment where they're tapping into the public frustration.
Has this changed the rules of how they can actually get business done in the Capitol?
Well, who said the revolution is not going to be televised?
Yet, when the Republicans do it, Joe Scarborough and the rest of that ilk in the lying legacy corporate corrupt mainstream media, this is treasonous. They need to let Schiff operate under the power of darkness. You know, Joe Scarborough said if a vote could be taken right now that would remain secret, Trump would be ousted, he would be impeached and removed. And you don't have a problem with that, Mr. Scarborough? I realize that the only reason you do your gig every day was so that you could meet Mika the pole dancer, steal her away from her husband after you'd abused your own wife, and, you know, you and the pole dancer are now hubby and wife, and, you know, you got kind of this, you know, creepy way you two interact with each other on TV every day. And you claim to have been a Republican at one time, but again, you're another one of those Democrats dressed in Republican drag. But you are supposedly a member of the media. You should be about truth, free speech, expression, shining the light of day on what's going on in secret places, especially on Capitol Hill. But now, because of your visceral hatred for the president, you will shred the Constitution and you will vote to impeach him, even though there's nothing impeachable. Jim Jordan explained it the best on Laura Ingraham, exactly what is so dangerous about what's happening, and letting someone like Adam Schiff for brains have this kind of control and power. And you people are worried about President Trump having too much control?
Here's the fundamental question. There's one person who started this whole thing, the whistleblower. In the whistleblower's complaint, bullet point number 1, he says, over the past 4 months, more than half a dozen U.S. officials gave me the basis for this complaint. To date, we don't know who any of those people are. So 435 members of the House who represent over 300 million people in this great country, and only one member of Congress, Adam Schiff, knows who the whistleblower is and who those more than half a dozen U.S. officials who gave him the information that formed the basis of his complaint. Why don't we know? More importantly, why don't you know in the media? Why doesn't the American people know? Adam Schiff is doing this unfair partisan process in secret, and our members finally said, enough. We're so frustrated. They reached a boiling point, and these guys marched in and said, we want to know what's going on because we represent 750,000 people back home in our districts, and they'd like to know what's going on because you guys are trying to take out a president 13 months before an election. That's what happened.
Well, that's it for this little rant today. Hey, thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you're a subscriber to the channel. If not, you can take care of that. Make sure that you give us a thumbs up and a like. Please share this video to all of your social media platforms. And don't forget, smack the bell for my next rant.